I can still feel the weight of that $20 bill in my hand, light as paper, heavy as betrayal. It was late afternoon, the kind of gray winter day where the sky presses down on you. My daughter, Lauren, stood in the doorway with her arms folded. Her voice didn't tremble. Mine did. "Dad, this is for gas," she said, pushing the bill into my palm like she was doing me a favor. Gas. As if that was all I'd need at 68, with no home, no plan, and arthritis gnawing at my knees. I looked past her shoulder into the house that had been mine for 3 decades. My chair in the corner, my tools in the garage, my photographs on the mantel. And behind her, leaning casually against the wall, was Sylvia, my ex-wife, watching like a queen overseeing an eviction. "You can't stay here anymore," Lauren said. "It's for the best." "For the best?" My voice cracked. "For who?" Sylvia's lips curved into that smug, knowing smile I'd learned to hate long before the divorce papers. "Daniel, it's time to move on. We have our own life now." I glanced at the suitcase by the door. Not mine, theirs. Packed with what they didn't want to see me touch. My belongings were already boxed in the garage, waiting for me to load into my truck. The wind cut through my jacket as I stepped outside. My truck's engine coughed before it caught. I looked in the rearview mirror, and for the briefest moment, I thought I saw Lauren's eyes soften. But then the door closed. Just like that. The $20 sat on the seat beside me. I couldn't bring myself to put it in my wallet. It felt more like an insult than help. I drove with no destination, the rain blurring streetlights into streaks. By the time I reached the old highway, the bill had slid onto the floor, forgotten until my stomach growled loud enough to remind me. A neon vacancy sign flickered ahead. The motel room smelled of mildew and lemon-scented cleaner. The mattress sagged in the middle, the kind that swallows your spine whole. I sat on the edge, staring at my calloused hands, and wondered how a lifetime of work, sacrifice, and fatherhood could end in a parking lot goodbye. I'd built homes with these hands, paid for braces, college, first cars. I'd taught Lauren how to ride a bike, how to drive a stick shift. I'd believed, truly believed, that when you gave everything to family, they gave it back when you needed it most. But the echo of the door closing behind me told a different truth. I unfolded the bill one more time, running my thumb over its edges. $20. That was the price they'd put on me. I lay down that night with the hum of the highway in my ears and a question burrowed into my mind, one that wouldn't let me sleep. How do you start over when you're 68 and you have nothing left to lose? Last night, the $20 bill felt like a verdict. This morning, it felt like a dare. The motel coffee tasted like burned cardboard, but it was hot, and at 68, heat felt like kindness. I washed my face in a sink that coughed rust and stared at a man I barely recognized. Same gray at the temples, same hands that could read a plank by touch alone. Different eyes, tired but not dead. I drove to a diner because the motel charged extra for toast, and humiliation is cheaper with eggs. The bell on the door jingled, and a waitress with kind crow's feet set down water before I asked, "Morning, hon." Her voice wrapped around me like a quilt. I counted out the coins that didn't require breaking that bill. She pretended not to notice. "You from around here?" she asked. "Used to be," I said. She nodded like she knew all the ways people become used to be. 2 men in paint-splattered hoodies slid into the booth behind me, boots thudding like punctuation. "City's got that Maple Street place up again," one said. "Condemned, tax lien, nobody wants it. Rot in the sill, foundation's laughing at gravity," the other snorted. "Auction Friday, deposit $5,000 cashier's check. You'd have to be desperate." Desperate. The word hung in the air until it found me. I ate slow to keep listening. When the waitress refilled my cup, she tilted her head toward the window. "Storm's coming." "It already did," I said, and she squeezed my shoulder like we were old friends. The library opened at 9. I took the back corner computer, the one with the sticky space bar, and typed Maple Street tax lien auction with 2 fingers. A PDF bloomed on the screen, address, parcel number, photos that looked like bad news, broken windows, porch buckled like a bad back. A red condemned slapped across the door, loud as a siren. I leaned closer. The siding was tired, but the roofline was honest. The lot had sun. A tree in the right place could shade the west wall, cut summer bills in half. Bones. Good bones don't lie. A librarian drifted by, glasses on a chain. Need help printing? Just looking, I said. Looking is how people begin, she smiled and floated away. I made a list on scrap paper. Jack posts, sister joists, rip out all plumbing, rewire from scratch. I still remembered the smell of fresh-cut pine and the feel of a level going true. What I didn't have was $5,000. I drove to the job board by the lumberyard where day labor gets traded like gossip. A contractor with sunburned forearms eyed me. You up for hauling demo? He asked, skeptical gaze dipping to my knees. My knees complain, I said. But they show up. He shrugged. Cash at day's end. We knocked drywall out of a bungalow like we were pulling rotten teeth. Dust crawled into my lungs and set up camp. My shoulders burned. My hands woke up. At noon, a kid young enough to be my grandson asked, "How old are you, man?" "Older than your jokes," I said, and he cracked a grin big enough to share. When the sun slid behind the mill and the foreman peeled bills from a roll, he paused at me. "Didn't think you'd last," he admitted, handing over 140. "Prove me wrong." "Story of my week," I said. Back at the motel, I lined the bills on the bedspread like soldiers and did the math I didn't want to do. Even if I strung 3 more days like this, I'd still be short. I opened the drawer and took out the velvet box I hadn't let myself touch. The ring looked smaller than the day I bought it. It had meant forever once. Now it meant collateral. The pawn shop smelled like metal and old rain. The man behind the glass had eyes that measured everything. "Sentimental or cash?" he asked. "Cash," I said, throat tight. He lifted the ring with tweezers, squinted. "I can do 800. "It's worth more," I said. "So are a lot of things." He set it down, patient as a clock. 800, today. I looked at the ring, at the reflections in the glass, of a man who'd built houses for strangers and been evicted from his own. I slid it toward him. "Make it 850, I said, my voice steady, "and tell me where a man can get a cashier's check at this hour." He studied me, then the ring, then me again, like he was deciding if the story mattered. His jaw shifted. 850, he said at last, opening the till. "And there's a credit union 3 blocks over. They close at 5. Outside, the sky pressed low and mean. I checked my watch. 4:32. My truck coughed, then caught. The dashboard clock glowed like a dare as I turned onto Maple Avenue. The ring-shaped emptiness burning in my pocket and the address from the auction flyer sweating through the scrap of paper in my fist. Because if the credit union door didn't swing open when I got there, that house, those bones, and whatever future I had left would slam shut with it. The credit union door was already half locked when I pushed through. "We're closing," the teller called without looking up. "I just need a cashier's check," I said, breathless. 5,000. Today. She glanced at the clock, then at me, the dust in my hair, the motel creases in my shirt, the way a man looks when the ground is moving under his feet. "Account number?" I slid over an old debit card I hadn't used in months and a stack of bills that smelled like drywall dust and pawn shop air. "Cash from a job, the rest from the account. Whatever penalties you need to take them." Her fingers paused on the keyboard. "There's an early withdrawal penalty on this CD." "Take it," I said. "Leave me enough to breathe." Minutes later, she slid the check under the glass. The weight of it steadied my hands, a promise on paper. I walked out into a sky the color of wet cement and felt the first small click of something turning in my favor. The auction was Friday at City Hall. Fluorescent lights, metal chairs, voices that tried to sound confident and landed on nervous. Maple Street was listed 8th. I held the cashier's check like a lifeline and studied the other bidders. Young guys in logo caps, 2 suits with clipboards, a man who smelled like cigarettes and primer. "Parcel 17, Maple Street." The clerk's voice flattened the room. "Opening at 40,000, the auctioneer said. "Do I hear 40? 40, a suit snapped. 42, I said before my courage could ask questions. 44, the cigarette man. 46, I answered. Sweat slid down my spine. I could feel every eye in that room counting my years and subtracting my odds. The clerk's pencil hovered like a metronome. 48, the suit murmured, bored. I looked at my hands. These hands had taught a girl to ride a bicycle and built a staircase without a squeak. 50, I said. Silence opened like a hallway. The cigarette man lifted his chin, reconsidered, shook his head. The suit consulted his clipboard and exhaled through his nose like a tired horse. Sold at 50, the auctioneer banged faster than my heart could catch up. Deposit due today. My legs wanted to fold. Instead, I stood. Daniel Mercer, I said, voice steady. The clerk checked my ID, took the check, gave me a stamped receipt that felt like a passport. 10 days to bring the balance. 10 days to figure out how a 68-year-old man with a motel key could buy a condemned house. Maple Street looked worse up close, boards yawning from the porch like missing teeth. A hinge hanging from the front door as if it had given up. Inside smelled like wet carpet and secrets. My flashlight cut a cone through the living room, buckled floor, wallpaper with flowers drowning in their own pattern, a ceiling stain the size of a lake. I lifted a corner of linoleum with my boot. Mold blinked back like stars in a wrong sky. Sir? A voice behind me. A neighbor in a pilled cardigan, arms full of mail. You buying this place? Bought it, I said. I'm Daniel. She hesitated, then offered the smallest smile. Maggie from next door. People have been dumping furniture out back. It's a shame. She studied my face like she was measuring more than resolve. You got help? I've got YouTube and a stubborn streak, I said. Sometimes that's enough, she said, and carried on down the walk. I made lists in a notebook that still smelled like the lumberyard. Jack posts, sister joists, rip out the kitchen to studs, new subfloor, rewire. No more knob and tube if I wanted to sleep without a fire extinguisher on my pillow. Nights, I read code books until the pages blurred. Mornings, I bargained at the salvage yard like my life was on clearance. I learned the names of screws I'd once ignored and the exact sound a level makes when it lands true. Pain kept me honest. My knees complained, my shoulders swore, my hands split open and healed with new maps. But work has a music of its own, and once I found the rhythm, the house started answering back. Joists straightened, the smell lifted, light returned to rooms that had forgotten it. The day the city inspector came, I stood on the porch with my hat in my hands like a man about to ask for a second chance. He walked slow, tapped things, hummed. You did this yourself? He asked finally under the crawlspace hatch. With a little help, I said. Neighbors. A retired electrician who missed arguing with wire. He scribbled, then looked up. You took a condemned structure and gave it bones again. I don't see that much. He signed the paper, official as a gavel. You're cleared. When the sign came off the door, I stood on the sidewalk a long minute and watched the house breathe. Then I painted the front door the color of a plum and set a geranium in the window like a promise. The listing photos made it look almost proud. Sunlight on the new floors, a modest kitchen that didn't lie, a porch that invited instead of warned. The first day on the market, a young couple walked through whispering numbers like prayers. The second day, an offer came in 10,000 over asking. The third day, a second offer beat the first by 5. I stared at the screen until the numbers steadied into cents. I signed. The ink dried. Profit. Not a fortune, not yet, but proof. I took my check to the same credit union and the same teller who'd watched me pull a future out of a penalty. She smiled like we were co-conspirators. Looks like you breathed, she said, counting. I did, I said. And the house did too. On my way out, I caught my reflection in the glass. Same gray temples, same hands, different eyes. The weight I carried wasn't shame anymore. It was momentum. That night, I tacked the before photo beside the after on the motel wall because you shouldn't trust a victory you can't see. I turned off the light and lay there listening to the highway hum like a long, patient animal. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, a number I didn't recognize glowing in the dark. It rang once, twice, 3 times, then stopped, leaving the room suddenly too quiet, and the question it carried hanging in the air, waiting for the next knock. The number flashed again the next morning, just as I was wrapping the motel's thin cord around my duffel bag. Same digits, same unfamiliarity. I let it ring twice before I answered. "Daniel?" Her voice hadn't changed, still wrapped in that sugar-coated softness that once made me believe every word. "Lauren," I said, flat as a leveled board. I was hoping we could talk. Maybe have dinner together. Just the family." Family. The word slid under my skin like a splinter. "It's been 2 years," I said. "Last time we spoke, you handed me $20 and a command to leave." "That was complicated," she said. "Things are different now. Mom and I thought—" "Mom and you?" I cut in. "That explains the unity of tone." She laughed nervously, the way people do when they're trying to wave away an inconvenient truth. "I've missed you, Dad. We've all missed you. Saturday night, 6 o'clock, at Mom's place. She's making your favorite, roast with rosemary." The picture in my head was sharp. Sylvia at the head of the table, Grady, her latest husband, at her side, and Lauren sitting across from me with that fixed smile, all of them pretending the last 2 years were a misunderstanding. "What's the occasion?" I asked. "Does there need to be one?" "Yes." She hesitated long enough for me to hear the faint buzz of background voices, hurried whispers, the rustle of paper. We want to reconnect. You've been doing so well," and she caught herself, but it was too late. There it was. Public records, property sales. My name tied to more than one lucrative deal. You didn't need to be in my life to know about my success. You only needed to know where to look. I let the silence stretch until I could hear her breathing change. Shorter, tighter. "I'll think about it," I said finally. "Please, Dad, it would mean the world to me." "That's a big claim for a dinner invitation," I said, but I kept my voice mild. "Saturday, you said?" "Yes." Her relief was so obvious it almost made me smile. 6 o'clock, at Mom's house, I repeated, tucking the details into a corner of my mind. "All right, I'll be there." "Wonderful." I ended the call before she could finish, the click echoing in the room like a nail driven home. The motel felt smaller after that. I sat on the bed, staring at the plum-colored front door and the photo tacked to the wall. My first victory. They must have seen that picture online, smiling at the profit margins like they belonged to them. I knew how Saturday would go if I walked in unprepared, soft lighting, practiced smiles, the pitch dressed as reconciliation. They'd circle to the point eventually, a request framed as an opportunity. I reached for my notebook, the same one that had held the Maple Street plans. This time, the list wouldn't be about beams and wiring. It would be about questions, leverage, and answers they wouldn't see coming. If they thought the man walking through Sylvia's door on Saturday was the same man they'd handed $20 to, they were going to learn just how much can change in 2 years, and just how much I'd learned about listening for what people don't say. The plan came together over bad coffee and a quiet morning. If Lauren's invitation was genuine, nothing I did would scare her off. But if it was about money, and I was almost certain it was, one well-placed lie would smoke out the truth before Saturday. I waited until mid-afternoon when people are just tired enough for their guard to slip. I rehearsed twice, letting my voice pick up a faint tremor, the kind that sounds like someone trying to hold themselves together. Then I dialed her number. She answered on the second ring, all brightness. "Dad, I was hoping you'd call." "Lauren, sweetheart," I said, making sure the word caught in my throat. "I have some bad news about my investments." The cheer in her tone dimmed instantly. "What kind of bad news?" "The market turned on me yesterday. I lost almost everything. The property values collapsed. I'm meeting with bankruptcy lawyers next week." I paused, staring at the balance in my real bank account, more than enough to buy 3 houses outright, and let the silence stretch. "How much is everything?" she asked carefully, like someone tiptoeing across a frozen lake. "Maybe enough left for a small apartment if I'm lucky." I don't know how I'm going to keep up. 12 seconds passed. I counted them. So, what does this mean for Saturday? She asked at last. It means I might not have much to offer, I said, waiting for the reflex that would tell me everything. She didn't disappoint. Then, maybe it's better if we do dinner another time. You know, once things are better. The switch was so quick it almost made me laugh. No, we'll figure it out together. No, it's not about money, just cold recalculation. I understand completely, I said, keeping my voice steady. It's just really complicated timing, Dad. I'm sure it is. I ended the call mid-sentence, the taste of confirmation sharp in my mouth. But suspicion wasn't enough. I wanted proof, real, solid, undeniable. I dug out the business card from the one man I knew could get it, Ethan Cole, private investigator, ex-FBI. We'd met years ago during a neighborhood watch initiative. Back then, neither of us imagined we'd cross paths over my own family. By late afternoon, I was sitting across from him in a cramped office above a locksmith shop, the air thick with the smell of old coffee and carpet cleaner. You want full background checks? He asked, flipping open a yellow legal pad. On my daughter Lauren and my ex-wife Sylvia. I need to know exactly what they've been doing these last 2 years. Any legal trouble, financial issues, business dealings, everything you can find. Why? They're about to ask me for something, I said, leaning back in my chair. I want to know exactly what strings are attached before I give an answer. Ethan studied me for a beat, then nodded. 1 week, 5,000, expenses included. You'll have the truth, Daniel. The next morning, the receipt for my payment sat on the desk beside the plum door photo. I poured myself coffee and stared out the motel window. Whatever he found, I would be ready. And when Saturday came, I wouldn't just walk into that dinner with answers. I'd walk in holding their entire deck of cards. Ethan called 5 days later, his voice as level as the horizon. You might want to come in for this one. When I stepped into his office, the smell of burnt coffee was sharper than before, as if the air itself knew what I was about to hear. 2 thick manila folders sat on his desk, the edges bent from handling. He slid the first toward me. Your daughter Lauren, he began, flipping it open. The first page was a screenshot, an online store called Lux Nest Decor, all white backgrounds and stage photos of furniture that looked like it had been plucked from magazine spreads. Then came the invoices. Payment after payment, $300 here, bar $200 there. She collected roughly $125,000 in customer payments. Ethan said, best we can tell, almost nothing was ever delivered. Items didn't exist, or if they did, they weren't what she advertised. The next page was worse. Messages from angry customers, demands for refunds ignored, threads of complaints in online forums, each one another brick in a wall she'd built against herself. She's careful enough to avoid formal charges for now, but she's on the radar of a few creditors and consumer protection agencies. It wouldn't take much to tip this into a legal case. I ran my hand over my face. And Sylvia? Ethan opened the second folder. She's been raising money through social media for an alleged chronic illness. Posts, photos, videos, the works. Pulled in close to $180,000 over the last year and a half. Only, he slid a medical record toward me. No diagnosis, no treatment. Her medical history is cleaner than yours. The photos in the file told their own story. Sylvia smiling on a beach in Cabo while donors commented about staying strong. Shopping bags dangling from her arms in front of designer storefronts, captioned as a rare good day between treatments. Fraud, I said flatly. Potentially prosecutable, Ethan replied. And there's more. Tax returns that don't even begin to account for the donations. If the IRS gets wind of this, they'll come down hard. I sat back, the weight of the truth pressing into me. This wasn't just opportunism or selfishness. This was systematic, deliberate deception. And now they wanted to sit me at a dinner table, look me in the eye, and spin another story until I signed a check. Ethan folded his hands. What do you want to do with this information? I want to use it, I said. All of it, but cleanly, legally. I don't want revenge that can be undone by a technicality. A slow nod. Then you'll need timing. Impact matters as much as evidence. Timing, impact. I'd learned the value of both swinging a hammer and negotiating a sale. Now I'd use them for something else entirely. That night, I spread the files across my motel desk like blueprints. Pages of fraud, lists of victims, tax discrepancies. My fingers lingered over Lauren's customer list, names, phone numbers, email addresses, each one a person she'd stolen from. If I was going to walk into that dinner, it wouldn't be as the father they thought they'd manipulated back into their lives. It would be as the man holding the match, standing in a room they'd soaked in gasoline themselves. And Saturday would be the spark. Saturday evening draped the neighborhood in that soft, false warmth of porch lights and clinking cutlery. I parked half a block away, engine ticking in the cool air, and let the weight of Ethan's folders settle into my briefcase. The gift box on the passenger seat was wrapped in silver paper and tied with a crimson ribbon. Inside, nothing but air. The real present would come later. Sylvia's house looked smaller than I remembered, though maybe it was the knowledge of what went on inside that shrank it. She opened the door in a cream dress and too much perfume, her smile rehearsed. "Daniel, you look successful." "It's good to be back," I said, stepping over the threshold where, 2 years earlier, she'd stood with Lauren to throw me out. Brings back memories. The dining room was set like a magazine spread, candles, china, roast glistening on a silver tray. Lauren emerged from the kitchen wearing a navy dress that tried to whisper stability, but couldn't hide the nerves in her eyes. "Dad," she said, hugging me with the stiffness of a handshake. "I'm glad you made it." "Wouldn't miss it," I said, placing the gift box on a side table where everyone could see it. "Special surprise for later." Grady hovered by the television, shifting in his too-tight shirt, clearly wishing for a football game instead of whatever he sensed was brewing. Dinner began with the usual forced small talk, but by the time the roast was carved, Lauren leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Dad, we've been thinking. Since you've done so well with investments, maybe we could explore a family partnership." "Family is everything," Sylvia chimed in, squeezing my hand like she was sealing a deal. I glanced at my watch. 7:28. "Success suits you too, Lauren. You look like someone with big plans." "Not alone," she said quickly. "A partnership. Just 200,000 would fix some temporary cash flow issues and position us for huge returns." 200,000, I repeated slowly. 7:29. That's precise. The doorbell rang at exactly 7:30. Lauren frowned. "Were we expecting someone?" "How unexpected," I said, rising slightly in my chair. Through the doorway, I watched her open the front door to a tall man in a navy suit. "Lauren Mercer, you've been served. King County Superior Court. Class action lawsuit for fraudulent business practices." Her color drained. "What? There must be some mistake." "Please sign here," the process server said calmly. "This concerns Lux Nest Decor and multiple counts of intentional fraud." Sylvia's voice shot from the dining room. "We're having a family dinner. Can this wait?" Lauren stumbled back in, clutching the papers, her eyes wild. "Dad, Sylvia's phone buzzed violently on the table. She glanced at the screen, expecting rescue, and froze. Notifications poured in, comments, tags, messages, faster than her fingers could swipe. What is this?" she whispered, scrolling. Her own Instagram feed was a wall of accusations. Fake illness exposed, stole from donors, medical records prove it. Grady leaned over her shoulder. "Sylvia, what illness? What are they talking about?" "It's lies," she snapped. But the tremor in her voice betrayed her. I stayed seated, watching it all unravel. "You both always said timing was everything," I murmured. "Tonight proves it." Lauren looked at me as if seeing me for the first time. You knew." "I planned it," I said evenly. "Consider it accountability." Sylvia's eyes darted between me, the gift box, and the phone exploding in her hand. "You can't just leave us like this." "Oh, I can," I said, standing. "And I will." But I didn't move toward the door just yet, because there was still one more thing they needed to hear before I left that table forever. 4 months later, I was standing barefoot on a stretch of Hawaiian sand, the Pacific sliding in and out like a slow breath. The sun was sinking, a copper coin slipping into the water, and for the first time in years, I felt light. That morning, my attorney, Merrick Stone, had called with the final updates. "It's all wrapped, Daniel," he said, the satisfaction in his voice like a well-earned toast. Lauren lost the case, full judgment against her. $153,000 in restitution, plus court costs. The judge made a point of noting the systematic nature of her fraud. It didn't help that we handed them airtight evidence. "And the criminal side?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Felony fraud. 3 years probation, community service, and a permanent record. Any employer who runs a background check will see it." I pictured her in the fluorescent vest of a court-ordered cleanup crew, the same woman who'd once looked me in the eye and called me useless. Now she'd spend her days paying back every dollar she'd stolen, one garnished paycheck at a time. Merrick continued. "Sylvia, the IRS hit her with over $200,000 in back taxes and penalties. Jessica Chen's article went viral. No coming back from that. Her influencer career is finished. She's working nights cleaning offices downtown." I let that sink in while the tide foamed at my ankles. I didn't feel glee, just the clean, cool satisfaction of balance restored. Grady, I'd heard, filed for divorce a month after the dinner, kept his business safe, walked away from the wreckage without looking back. Even the bystanders in this story couldn't outrun the fallout forever. The truth was, I hadn't just won in court. I'd won something bigger. My life was mine again. The plum-colored front door of that first flip was just the beginning. Since then, I'd expanded my portfolio. Seattle, Tacoma, even a vacation rental here in Hawaii. All honest deals, all built on skill and sweat instead of lies. Rebecca, the woman I'd met on a trip to Yellowstone, walked up behind me now, her hand warm on my shoulder. "You seem so at peace," she said. "I've let go of something heavy," I told her. "I learned that some people earn their place in your life. Others just take up space until you see their true value." The $20 they gave me that night had been an insult, but also an accidental gift. It put a price on what they thought I was worth, and it lit the fire that proved how wrong they were. We stood there until the sun slipped completely under the horizon, the waves erasing every footprint from the sand. Tomorrow I'd fly back to Seattle, to the work and life I'd built from nothing. Lauren might still be serving her community service hours. Sylvia might be scrubbing her reputation off corporate carpets. But me? I was exactly where I wanted to be. Free, solvent, respected, and unshakable. And I hadn't just survived what they did to me. I'd made it the foundation for everything I'd become. If this story moved you in any way, don't forget to hit the like button, leave a comment below, I read every single one, and subscribe for more powerful stories like this. Your support helps us keep sharing voices that deserve to be heard.